A third British national has been diagnosed with suspected Hantavirus infection linked to an outbreak on board the cruise ship MV Hantavirus.
A serious outbreak of a virus that could become more deadlier than COVID. Could Huntervirus become the next pandemic? Let's dive in. For decades, scientists have warned that the next global health crisis may not begin in a laboratory or even in a hospital. It could begin quietly in forests, in farms, in abandoned buildings, where infected rodents live unnoticed among humans. Now, a growing outbreak involving Hantavirus is once again raising concerns among health experts, and many people are asking the same chilling question: could this become the next pandemic? Tonight, we break down what Hantervirus actually is, how it spreads, and why health officials are monitoring it closely, and what every family should know right now. Because while this is not another COVID-style emergency at this moment, history has showed us ignoring early warning signs can come at a terrible cost. And what makes Hantavirus especially concerning is not just the virus itself, but how easily people can underestimate the environments where exposure happens. So what is Hantavirus?
A third British national has been diagnosed with suspected Hantavirus infection linked to an outbreak on board the cruise ship MV Hantavirus.
Well, Hantavirus, it's named after a river in South Korea, and that word, Hantavirus, really describes a sort of family of viruses. Around 20 viral species have been identified according to the World Health Organization. It's not just one infection. It's really serious, but it's also relatively rare, and it's linked to exposure to rats and mice. The risk is typically highest when someone's doing something like, for example, cleaning out a building that's had a rodent infestation. So most of the human cases are reported in rural settings such as forests, fields or farms where rodents are present, and that means the opportunities for exposure are greatest.
So cleaning, sweeping and clearing out old buildings or perhaps places where there may well be potential rats infestation puts it at a higher risk, and that is why Hantavirus are such a group of viruses primarily carried by certain wild rodents. Humans can become infected after contact with contaminated urine, droppings or saliva, especially when tiny particles become airborne and are inhaled, and that's where many people get caught off guard. Unlike viruses that spread through obvious symptoms from person to person, Hantavirus exposure can happen slightly through the environment itself. But before we go any further, as we're trying to grow this channel, would you be kind enough to like this video and subscribe to this channel? That is one of the ways you can support independent journalism. Thank you. We continue. So while this is not a serious health risk to the public, there is a particular strain that we must pay attention to, and I'll come to that later in the video. Now it is spoiler alert, or should we say conspiracy alert, or should we say cynicism alert, something sinister. Yes, guess what? In the back of my yard I've seen a dead rat. Yes, I found a dead rat in the back of my yard just about 3 or so weeks ago. And I'm thinking, where did this rat come from? And my first initial thought or theory is that it must have eaten some poison and died in the back of my yard. So, strangely enough, Hantavirus came from rodents. Nevertheless, let's continue. Yes, as normally is, the Huntervirus outbreak started out on a cruise ship, and guess what the cruise ship is called that started the Huntervirus? The Hantavirus, very similar in names.
Cruise ship passengers have now died, others are being treated in hospital, and dozens more are stranded at sea, all after catching a strain of a disease that's usually spread by rats. The Hantavirus, a luxury cruise ship that was taking around 150 people from the southern tip of Argentina to Cape Verde off the coast of West Africa, until 3 people on board died after becoming seriously ill. Lab testing confirmed they had a rare disease called Hantavirus. Since then, there's been more suspected cases, including a British doctor and 2 others who've been evacuated to hospital, and a man who was on the ship last month who's now being treated in Switzerland.
So what are the symptoms? Well, the symptoms, early signs, are ordinarily deceptive. You will have fever, fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, sometimes nausea and dizziness. But in severe cases, the virus can attack the lungs and making breathing extremely difficult, a condition known as Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. And although infections remain relatively rare compared to major global viruses, the fatality rate in severe cases can be frighteningly high as up to 30%. That is very high. And in some cases where the Hantavirus strain, the one that can transmit from human to human, the more dangerous strain, the fatality can be up to 50%. So you can just imagine that strain being passed from human to human, and if 10 people are infected, 5 will die. Wow, that is shocking. But come to think of it, the ship that carries the outbreak is called MV Hondius, and the most dangerous strain is called Hantavirus. Very similar in name. This must be a coincidence. So it is important to repeat this. Like I said earlier on, the deadly strain is called Handes, or some people call it Handies, and the ship is called MV Hondius. So if you remove the MV and had Andes to it, you'll have Handies Hondius, which means deadly virus ship. Yes, man, but this is nothing to suggest that the strain that killed those people on the ships is linked to this deadly strain, because that information is not out yet, as I understand it. But it is important to make note of this deadly strain, because that is what people need to watch out for. And one thing that comes to mind when we talk about this deadly strain transmitting from human to human: gain of function. Now, I'm not going to say any more on that. You need to go onto Google or wherever you search and look up gain of function, and then you will understand what I am saying. Or if you prefer, you can get this book here on your screen, because this book explains what a gain of function is, and it is presently on Amazon, and I will put the link in the description box for you to click on it if you are interested in learning more about viruses and bacteria and how to deal with pandemics and so on. But here is a question nobody is asking: is the Huntervirus outbreak may develop into a new pandemic? For a virus to mutate and transmit from animals to human with different DNA footprint is called zoonosis, and that should normally takes about 800 years, as it has been reported. But nowadays it appears as if the process is getting more faster and quicker. And the question is, why? So how to prevent catching it, or what do you do to protect yourself from it? Well, the usual thing: wash your hands and look out for areas where can be infested by rats or rodents can live there and so on. Block areas that they can enter, and remember to use spray to wipe surface area, wear gloves when you're dealing with areas that might be infected. You would soak and rinse off things properly, wipe with paper towels and clean areas, throw away plastic bags and so on, and try and keep the environment clean and avoid any sort of potential infested area from you getting contaminated by not disturbing the area, or wear a mask if you have to work in that environment. So, are we heading for a pandemic, or is it too early to say? That is the question. Sound off in the comment section. Let's have a discussion, a debate, and let's talk about where this virus is heading, or whether it will be contained and we will not hear about it again for a long time. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I shall see you on the other topic.